Oops, I don't know what it is. So what are we trying to accomplish here? There are many causes, we talked about that, but there's also two possible goals. One is to improve educational and social outcomes. The other is to improve behavioral compliance and reduce conflict. I try to focus on the first one. But a lot of times, teachers are overburdened, and again, as somebody pointed out, they don't necessarily have the skills, and they tend to focus on the second. And parents also too, because these kids are hard to manage. They're difficult. All right, so I'm going to have to whip through this pretty fast. Come on. Talk to me. Okay, so short-term stimulant treatment. Stimulants are very good at reducing short-term hyperactive inattention seekers. They work really well. About 70-80% of people, Chad says 85, but they're kind of paid for by the drug companies, so they're inflating a little bit there.
I mean, that's the whole problem right there. I mean, you've got, you know, the whole thing is manipulated by drug companies.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I don't think it's the whole problem. I think it's a big part of the problem. The Australian site that I looked at said 60 to 75%. I think that's probably a pretty good estimate right there, of kids will actually improve when they take stimulants in the short term. So that means they're going to reduce their hyperactivity, reduce their impulsive actions, they won't call out in class much, and they will pay more attention to things that they might normally find dull. There's a lot of talk about this paradoxical effect. You know what that means? That ADHD kids somehow react differently to stimulants than normal kids, and that's how you tell if they have it. Total bunko. This was debunked back in 1978 by Judith Rappaport, who gave stimulants to normal high school teenagers and found exactly the same kinds of things, that there would be less motor activity, there would be more focus on a particular task, they'd be harder to distract. She said that the reason why it's considered treatment for the ADHD kids is because that's what people are looking for, that's what they're wanting, whereas the normal kid, they don't care if they're less active because they're not a problem. So there really is no paradoxical effect. There are side effects including sleep loss, appetite suppression, irritability, aggression. This one I think is the one that disturbs me the most, especially when I see in foster kids, kids who have anxiety problems or attachment problems. They don't have such good control of their aggression anyway, and if you give them a stimulant, you're cranking up their dopamine levels and they may become more aggressive. And instead of saying, the doctor saying, oh wait, we just increased their dopamine, they become more aggressive, there's probably a connection there. A lot of times they get diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and then they get put on Abilify, which has a dampening effect on the same dopamine that you're increasing with the stimulant. So to me, it's just totally crazy. Like you're increasing dopamine with one drug, decreasing it with the other one, because you did too much increasing. Doesn't make sense. So anyway, you see a kid that has ADHD and bipolar disorder, you automatically just need to be suspicious. Like, when did that bipolar disorder thing start? Was it before or after you gave them the stimulants? So in somewhere around 80-90% experience unwanted side effects. Long-term outcomes. Here are the consequences of untreated ADHD, according to a source online. Lower educational attainment, difficulty maintaining employment, more likely to be divorced, increased interpersonal problems, twice as likely to smoke cigarettes, twice as likely to abuse alcohol, more likely to suffer from anxiety, depression. Sounds bad, right? So that's what happens with untreated ADHD. And then anytime you hear somebody kind of pitching why our kids should be on medication, anybody have, as a parent, hear that pitch to them about why their kids should be put on medication because of all these possible long-term outcomes? Anybody? Okay. Well, this is kind of what they tell people, is to say, well, you don't want your kid to turn into a delinquent, right? You're going to increase the chance of delinquency. One problem, however, none of those consequences, not a single one on that list, is improved by stimulant treatment. None of them. Zero. Okay? I should be fair. Probably the one about accidents, there's somewhat of an improvement. That's the only one that's really just less accidents. But other than that, stimulants don't change any of that.
Treatment of ADHD.
Yes. I'm saying kids diagnosed with ADHD, they compare kids who stayed on stimulants versus ones who got ADHD and were not treated with stimulants. No difference in the long run. Let me show you some studies. There's literature review first done in 1978 by Barkley and Cunningham. Russell Barkley, yes, the same Russell Barkley, who claimed that not medicating your child with ADHD was child abuse. I've never quite forgiven him for that, because he called me a child abuser. But he, and he's a big ADHD guru, sells books about it, goes and gives talks. He, in Cunningham, found 1978 no lasting positive effects in academic performance from stimulant use. Swanson, in 1983, no improvement in academic skills, athletic skills, social skills, antisocial behavior, or arrest rates. These are all the things that you would want to improve, right? None of them got better. None. OSU, Oregon State, Drug Effectiveness Project. This is about 2004, 3, somewhere back there. Good quality evidence is lacking that ADHD drugs improve global academic performance, consequences of risky behavior, social achievements, and any other measure. So that's 3 separate reviews, and these guys looked at 2,287 studies. It looked like every study you could possibly find on the subject. And they're saying there is no quality evidence that any of this is improved.
Is that what you call a meta-study?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a systematic review. A
Okay.
meta-study is
So, the MTA. Now, that's not a meta review. All right. Stimulant users. This is the MTA study that you've heard about. This got big press. Stimulant users had better symptom control at 14 months, improved reading scores at 14 months. But all those advantages were gone at the 3 and 8 year follow-ups. This is the good news. Most of the kids continue to have sustained improvement regardless of whether they took medication or didn't take medication. But when that 1 year, the 14-month stuff came out, there was this big international announcement like, now we have proof that ADHD, that stimulants improve ADHD over the long term. And the reading scores were not improved that much, by the way. But all that stuff went away by 3 years.
Hey Steve, what
Yeah.
is MTA?
MTA, I can't remember what it stands for, multimodal treatment, something thing. And there were no difference between the stimulant and non-stimulant groups. I don't know why this is going off the bottom of my screen here.
But weren't there a lot of physical, physiological harm done to those that was kept on the drug, like sleeping less and?
They had, for sure they had growth retardation. The kids that used the stimulants over time had significantly lower height and weight than the ones who did not. That's the only negative measure that they found.
Almost like they're trying to stimulate them to grow faster and develop faster than they naturally do, and it just throws off the whole developmental growth
Right.
timeline.
Peter Bain talks about that a bunch, where he said it's not just that they're shorter. There's other aspects of growth that are not visible from the outside. There's organ development, brain development, liver, heart development, all those kind of things. If you're not growing, are all going to be affected. Puberty can be affected. So, growth retardation isn't like a minor issue. All right, the RAIN study was done in 2010 in Australia, or was finished in 2010, reported on. They compared, again, stimulant-treated ADHD diagnosed kids to those that were not. They found no significant differences in depression, self-esteem, or social functioning. Stimulant users were 10 times more likely to perform below grade level according to their teacher's rating, which I found kind of shocking. Stimulant users also had elevated diastolic blood pressure. And their quote was, the results seem to indicate there's little long-term benefit of stimulant medication in the core symptoms of ADHD. Now, that's saying core symptoms. That's not even outcomes I'm talking about. They're saying these kids were not less hyperactive, not less inattentive, not less distractible when they had long-term stimulant treatment. So stimulants, what's the picture emerging here? Stimulants are a short-term intervention. They work for a little while, and then they stop working. So you need to be doing some other stuff, not just stimulants. 2013, 4,000 children in Quebec studied over 11 years. Findings were ADHD boys treated with stimulants performed worse in math than the non-treated in the short and long term, and were more likely to repeat a grade, which kind of fits with the Australian study. Girls receiving treatment were more likely to have psychological problems like anxiety and depression, which are side effects of medication, but also may indicate that they're getting the diagnosis because they have some other psychological issues that need to be looked at.
Do they factor control for the possibility that those receiving treatment had more severe symptoms, which is why they were given medication?
The MTA study was randomized. The other two were naturalistic studies, where they just were looking at did the ones who get stimulus do better than the ones that weren't. So it's hard to do a long-term, like an 11, 12-year study in a controlled condition. But it's also true that that's the conditions that people are exposed to in the real world. I think it's very, very significant when we're talking about millions of kids being put on stimulants that we're seeing in the collective, they're not getting any better outcomes. So we're exposing them to some pretty significant risks of harm without any improvement in outcomes. So that leads to the next question. Well, if that's not improving long-term outcomes, what should we do? And this is the fun part, I think. Now we meet Kevin. Kevin's our youngest. In addition to all the exact same things that Patrick displayed, some of these are overlaps. He's very, very smart, very athletically gifted. He loved to climb. We used to have keep our telephone up on top of our upright piano, not a spinner, it's a full upright piano, probably 6 feet off the ground, because Kevin would play with telephone. So at one point he managed to climb up onto there. It was like 13 months or something like that. Climbs up, picks up the telephone, get it away from him, hang it up. Seconds later, get a call back. Oh, this is 911. Is there an emergency? I said, no. I'm sorry, my son got hold of the phone. They said, well, you should put it up somewhere where he can't get a hold of it. What, am I supposed to nail it to the ceiling? How much higher can we go? I guess I could have gone on the top of the refrigerator maybe. That was about it. So he was very talented at climbing. He got into stuff. And he wasn't being troublesome, He wasn't being difficult. He just thought it was fun and interesting to climb up on things. Moved very, very quickly, hard to keep up with. He was very oppositional and argumentative. He hated sleeping. Both Patrick and Kevin at one time said, why do we have to sleep? It's so boring. That's true. Both of them still don't like sleep. There were some friends who wouldn't watch him because he was too difficult for them to manage. And his nickname was Wild Boy. So that's Kevin as a toddler. Kevin today graduated high school last year with a 4.0 GPA. All-state soccer player. He is now attending Evergreen State College. Never involved with drugs, crime, all those things that they warn you about are supposed to happen. Lots of friends and social groups. Very happy and confident about himself. No medication at any time. No particular diagnosis or treatment at any time. And you certainly know all the criteria when he was young. He was crazy wild. So what did we do? First one, this is, I think, possibly the most important thing. Alternative schooling. This guy, Peter Gray, is a psychologist. He did a qualitative study, which meant he just interviewed people about their experience with kids in alternative schools and homeschooling. This is in Psychology Today. And he found that the kids who were homeschooled or were in alternative schools generally did not get on medication at any time, and that it wasn't really a problem. That they had less behavioral problems, less of the symptoms of ADHD, and that they tended to be successful in that environment. Flynn and Rappaport in 1976 did symptom comparisons of kids in open classroom at the beginning and the end of a year that they had transferred. You know what an open classroom is? Everybody have an idea what that would be? Yeah, it's like you have like workstations, like Montessori. Anybody know what Montessori is? Kind of like that, right? You have workstations where there's certain tasks that you can do, but you get to decide where you go, when you're starting, when you're finished, right? So you have a lot more choices, and when you're at the station, you have more options of what you do first and how long you stay on a particular task. So they said those kids' symptoms improved a year later without any medication. Jacob and friends in 1978 set up a very good controlled experiment where they had kids who were matched by age, gender, socioeconomics, race, all the things that you could have as variables that you could think of. Put some of them in a regular classroom, traditional classroom, and some of them in an open classroom. And had teachers go in with this assessment tool and try to distinguish who was the ADHD child. In the regular classroom, they were like 90% accurate. In the open classroom, they could not distinguish between the ADHD kids and the so-called normal kids. So this should raise a question in everybody's mind. Why don't we have these things? Why aren't we creating these situations for kids who have difficulties paying attention in the regular classroom? It's a very viable solution. Nobody ever quotes those things, by the way. I tell people about these. Nobody knows about these. The other big thing that we did was we used some creative behavior management. I was very fortunate to get a job at Edgefield Children's Center working with emotionally disturbed kids when Patrick was about 5. And I learned a lot there about behavior management. I also learned that standard behavior management stuff doesn't always work the same way for kids like this. And the story I like to tell is that Ginny, my wife, right here, had volunteered to do childcare while I was doing a parenting class after school. And so all the parents came with us, and the kids stayed out with her. Well, this one time, she was supposed to have an assistant. The assistant didn't show up. She had every single kid that came, and it was like, what, 11, 12, 13 kids, something like that.
Yeah.
Over 10 kids. And it was like 11 or 12 kids are there. All emotionally disturbed kids. And Patrick. So we go in, and we're like, do you need help? Can somebody stay? She's like, no, I got it. So we go in, we do our parenting presentation. 2 hours later, we come out. All 12 or so of the emotionally disturbed kids are happily playing on the playground, but Patrick is standing on the sidewalk screaming and complaining and protesting, having to take a time out. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, maybe I should enroll him. So that's the kind of thing that we're dealing with here. That's the kind of intensity and difficulty. He really was kind of on a par with kids that were at Edgefield Children's Center. All right, so here's some things we learned. Emphasize the positive rather than the negative. These kids really, they're looking for stimulation. That's the thing that they all have in common. They're looking for stimulation. They want fun, exciting things to happen. And actually, as you remember Patrick running along, he didn't mind falling down and hitting himself on the ground. He didn't mind walking into the telephone pole, right? It's just another form of stimulation. So getting into an argument with you, having you yell at him, telling you, he better go to timeout right now, your face gets all red and everything, that's pretty damn interesting, right? That's fun. Look, I'm having an effect. This is really interesting. What made that happen? Can I do it again? Let's push that button another time. And you know what I'm talking about? They think it's fun. They're willing to tolerate some pain in order to get this entertainment. So you don't want to spend a lot of time noticing negative things because it's reinforcing. They think it's fun. They thrive generally on excitement and intensity, so you want to make it fun to do the thing you want them to do. Anybody think of a way that you would make it fun to do? Let's say you have a toddler, you're trying to get them to clean up. What's that?
Clean their room.
Clean their room. Okay. You're trying to get
Make
them to
a
clean
race out of it. How fast can you do it?
How fast can you do it? Yes, use the timer, right?
I bet
Or-
you can do it faster than I can.
Right. We're gonna have a contest to see who can get the most blocks into this thing first. Ready? Go. They love that stuff. It's fun. And then when they're done, you have to be really mad that they beat you. You let them win, and you're like, ah, God, oh, you beat me. Darn it. They think it's hilarious. Make acting out very boring. Give the consequences totally flat, no emotions. Like, okay, time out. You want to go? You know what happens. I'm going to go read my book now. Let me know when you're done with your time out. Just keep it really flat. Also, this is important. Allow the child to earn back part of their privileges, because they get mad when they feel like they've been, that injustice is like really important to these kids too. So they get mad when they feel like they've lost something. So if you give them an opportunity to say, well, okay, if you do this and this and this, you can earn back some of your privileges, then they will be more motivated to do the positive thing. And again, you can then reinforce it for doing right instead of punishing. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's cool.
So that fits with don't let them dig a hole too deep, because if they feel like there's no way to get out of the hole, they're like, hey, what have I got to lose? Let us all go for broke, right? Okay, programming. Come up with goals together. No more than 2 or 3. Sometimes 1. Sometimes 1 is all they can handle. Use immediate reinforcement. Something chosen by the child. We used to use like shiny stickers that they would pick out, Learning Palace. Sometimes you can use physical reinforcement, hugs and time together, those kinds of things. And then when you get a certain number of those things together, you do something fun together. And again, you want to make it something intense, something that they pick. If it means something that they make you have to do, it's really kind of even more fun. Kevin at one point was having a hard time when he going to bed, that he didn't want to, he would go do his teeth, right, and then he would take a long time and goof around and everything, and I would nag him and everything. I'm like, it's stupid, you know better than this. So one night I brought my book along with me, and I said, it's because it was reading time, and I said, okay, as soon as you're done with your teeth, we're going to read, but take as long as you want, because I got my book here, and it's a really good book, and I'm enjoying it, so just take as long as you want in that bathroom. 2 minutes later, he is back. I'm like, are you done already? He's like, yeah. It's like, can I just, I'm a really good part. Can I just read a little more? He's like, no. It's like, I have to read to you. Darn it. And I bring the book down the bed. I'm like, oh, fine, give me the book. He laughed and laughed and laughed. He thought it was hilarious. And even after I'd done it 2 or 3 times, and he knew it was a game, he still thought it was funny, funny, funny. I still pulled it with him when he was a teenager, and he swore it didn't work, but it continued to work. Use TV video time as a reward. Not something they can do all the time? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Go ahead.
okay. That is another thing that's extremely difficult in the class setting because
Yeah.
most in school because most of their homework is now 99% of it is now computer based.
Yep.
And you can't stop them from going
Right.
to something else.
Right.
You just and you have to actually continuously watch their screen if you can.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, and you may have to, in that kind of case, you may have to say, if you can continue on this particular subject for X number of time, then I will allow you to do. Some programs have passwords, or you can have a part where you can
But
continue, but it's
they're
hard.
smart enough to
It's hard to do.
bypass
That's right. They know more about it than you do.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
All right. It's also a good idea to forget the reinforcer when they're being good. Remember that they don't have great memories. They're living in the moment, right? So after they start getting the reinforcement, one of the things about reinforcement programs is that sometimes kids will stop if they don't get the reinforcement. But these guys, especially if you add the social reinforcement with it, after a while you just forget to give it to them, and if they don't ask it for you, then they just start making it a regular habit. And then you jack up.
Well, and I mean, like just basic behavioral conditioning is if always reinforcing a behavior is not as effective as occasionally
Yeah,
reinforcing.
exactly. What do you call it? The slot machine effect. You got to pull 10 times to see if you're going to get the reward. And then when they're doing better, then you increase the goal to a higher level. Yeah.
What I was going to
Okay.
say is one thing that we personally changed from Patrick to Kevin was we realized with Kevin that we needed to be really concrete, and that's what Patrick needed. It took us a while to figure that out. Really concrete, that if you do this, here's what's going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're doing the reward thing or not.
Right.
And like with Kevin, he was so active and could crawl well at 5 months. Literally put him in the playpen for 10 seconds.
Yeah, we
He
started.
got the idea.
We started timeouts when he was 6 months. 6 months he could
Yeah.
crawl up the stairs. He was crazy. All right, paradoxical approaches. You kids like this tend to be oppositional. You can use this to your advantage. Betting is my favorite. You bet the child that they can't do what you want them to do. Kevin had a really hard time settling down for bed. He would smuggle toys and he would play with his socks or under the covers, whatever. So I bet him. I said, I bet you a quarter you can't stay still for a minute without moving. He's like, I can't too. I was like, no, you can't. I can't too. All right, ready, start. So I had to wait like a minute and a half before I could even start the clock because it was so wiggly the first time around. But I waited until he won, and of course I gave up the quarter begrudgingly. Oh, dang it. But tomorrow we're going for a minute and a half, and I know you can't do that one. And so we did that for about 2 weeks, and we got up to 5 minutes. And by the end of the second week, when we got to that 5 minute point, he would immediately just go like, and instantly be calm. So don't tell me that they can't learn. Don't tell me that there's a switch there that they can't run. It's a matter of motivating the kid to learn how to do the process. And then we got to the end of it, I said, well, I guess you can control your behavior if you want to. You just really have to decide that that's what you want to do.
Wow.
That was pretty powerful. Timers, making a challenge to complete something before the clock rings. Crosstalk is a good one I learned at Edgefield. You talk to your partner or somebody else about the likelihood of them doing something. You say, Patrick's going to take a really long time to get dressed. He's very predictable. They hate being predicted too. He's very predictable. You know it's going to take a long time. And then Gina will say, well, I don't know. I think he could do it. You're like, no, come on. There's no way. You may even make a bet with them and say, all right, I'll bet you a quarter he's not going to be down here in 5 minutes. So again, it makes it fun. You're not talking to them. You're not punishing them. You're not giving them attention for acting out. But you're talking about them doing the right thing. And also talking about the decision. You're making them have to think, what am I going to do? Which is another fault of these kids because they're living in the moment. They don't think ahead. So you're actually plotting for them what the future could look like. Could you go this way? Could you go that way? In a way that doesn't directly engage them when they're not acting out. Does that make sense? All right, I'm running out of time here. So the more fun it is, the better. If you can have them defeat you in the process of doing something boring, it's always a good idea. Family meetings, you probably know about that. It's best if they make the rules up. You want to write down what you agree to and have them pick out the good and the bad consequences. One time, Kevin and Patrick and Sean were having trouble with arguing, not physically, and they said that they wanted to do push-ups. I was like, no, please, not push-ups. They're like, no, we want to do push-ups. I'm like, no, come on, can't you come with something? No, we're going to do push-ups. So we agreed to do push-ups. We were in the middle of Winco Foods. They started having an argument. I'm like, okay, guys, you know the deal. They dropped down in the middle of Winco Foods. We were doing push-ups. And this one lady looked came by, gave me the dirtiest look. And I said to her, it's not my idea. They wanted to do this. But I was some kind of maniacal, super militaristic dad. The other thing that's kind of fun is if you set up a situation where you're not allowed to swear and you have to put a coin in the swear jar, right? If you have to do the same thing, they like that because then they can catch you. They say, you swore, you have to put the coin in. So they feel like they have some power. It makes it more fun for them to comply because they can say, I'm better than you at that. And then you review those rules as you needed. And it's nice if they can do it to let them lead sometimes.
What do you mean by that?
Let them lead the meeting.
Ah.
Let them be the chairperson. And they kind of like that sometimes. Gives them a new role, something to do. So energy points was my favorite thing that I invented. This is brilliant. I invented this. Create a need to figure out what I need. So you start each day at 0 energy points. You get +1 if you do something that makes me feel more energetic. You get -1 if you drain my energy out. If you go below 0, I don't do anything for you. I don't make lunch. I don't drive anywhere. I don't play basketball. I don't talk to you. I don't do anything until you get back on the positives.
And you can do it concretely, like if you're playing like bingo chips or poker chips with a jar. We even did that for a while. So then you can really see.
Yeah. And of course, arguing makes you lose another point. If you argue about, I shouldn't have lost the point, well, now you lost another point. You don't want to go below -2. I figured this out because then they're dug in too deep and they don't want to play anymore. But then you give them jobs that they can do or some other way that they can earn back points. But you make them think of it. It's like, what's going to make me feel more energetic? You tell me. So it forces them, again, to plan ahead. And it forces them also to think about how you might feel, which is often a deficiency in these kids, is that they just do what they think they want to do and they don't really think about you and what's going to be how you feel. You try to be positive preemptively. You don't wait till they do something bad. You spend positive, intense time together before anything bad happens. We used to just take 5 minutes in the morning and just do something fun. We just throw them up in the air, tickle over, and run around, or do something that was fun for them, and that would immediately set them off on a really good foot. You ignore again the negative behavior to the extent humanly possible, and anything that they do that required consideration or patience for them to do something that might be bold, you make sure that you acknowledge them with intensity. Like, wow, thank you so much. That is so cool that you washed the dish for me. I can't believe you did that. That is awesome. Thank you. You made me feel really good. Just really go overboard because they're looking for that intensity. Environmental management stuff, you precede exciting things with dull necessities. When you're done with this, then we're going to do this fun thing. You make sure that if they do something that's hard or dull for them, that they get to do something fun right afterwards. Try to keep the dull things in short little bites. Give warnings for transition, really, really important. They do not like to suddenly stop things. In fact, that study I was talking about where they said that the kids in the regular classroom stood out like a sore thumb that had ADHD diagnoses. One of the things the researcher observed was that these kids were constantly being told to start and stop things. They're like, okay, take out your spelling books. They take the spelling books out. You work on spelling for 10 or 15 minutes. Like, okay, put your spelling books away. Take out your reading. Put that away. Take out your math. Okay, time to go to recess. Time to go to the bathroom. And it was like constantly being directed around, and it drove these kids crazy. They couldn't stand it because they'd be like, okay, we got 10 spelling words to learn by Friday. All right, I'm going to learn 10 spelling words. I'm going to learn them today. I'm not going to stop like the tetherball, right? I'm not going to stop till I got these things learned. When I've only learned 4 of them, and I have to do math. I don't want to do math. I want to finish my spelling words. They get into it like that, right? So you have to give them a warning for a transition. Timers are really good for that, especially you can even have them set the timer when they get old enough. Say, okay, how much is 5 minutes? Go ahead, put it for 5 minutes. We're going to be leaving in 5 minutes. Turn the timer on. When the timer rings, we have to go. Take care of sleep, food, toileting. They forget. They don't want to go to the bathroom.
I think that is super important.
Yeah.
On the food piece,
It was.
controlling the diet a lot. I mean, there are a lot of studies that show that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when his blood sugar would go down, Patrick in particular, would just be a disaster. And we would start getting into some stuff and we couldn't manage it all. And we're like, okay, when's the last time he ate? Give him a banana. I do have a Junie too. Yeah. She gets really grumpy. I'm like, eat a banana. She gets better. So but they forget that
lack
stuff.
of sensitivity, like when he falls down and he doesn't, and he runs into the post, and it's like, oh no big deal. There's kind of there's same with my son. There was so much going on in his head that there was no body awareness,
Right.
no awareness when they're tired or when they have to eat.
It's kind of like this out-of-body experience. They're constantly trying to create some kind of stimulation, excitement, and they're just really not paying any attention to what that body's feeling. Create external time structure. They're not good with time generally. If you use visuals too, a lot of them are visual learners rather than auditory, and you can say something over and over to them. But you give them a nice green card that says, here's the 3 things you need to do this morning and the times you need to do them by. It works a lot better. Or if you have a schedule posted up, that's really, really helpful. And then limit the time for those dull activities. Make them short. You want to make it something that they can succeed at. They can do, like I did with the holding still thing, right? If you can do it for a minute, then be proud of them for doing it for a minute, and then stretch it out to a minute and a half, rather than setting them up for failure, saying, okay, you're going to be cleaning this whole set of dishes here. Have them say, you're going to clean. How many do you think you can clean? You think you can clean 3? Okay, 3 dishes. Go for it. And then we do 3. That's awesome. Tomorrow, let's go for 4. Make sense? All right. And you want to build on their strengths. There are lots of positives associated with ADHD. Talk about what they're good at, that they're smart, that they're athletically talented, that they're persistent. Identify those as strengths, even though persistence is stubbornness turned upside down, right? Don't tell them they're stubborn. Say, you're persistent. My son Sean, the non-ADHD one, he was a great liar. But I wouldn't say, you lie a lot. I'd say, you are good at telling stories. You're a great storyteller. That's a strength you have. Sometimes it's not really helpful when you choose to tell the stories, right? So talk about what they're good at. Frame the difficulties as challenges to be overcome with their strengths. Patrick, I one time remember having this conversation with him where he was talking about, I can't remember what it was exactly, but we ended up talking about behavior with people. And I said, Patrick, you are great at math. Math is the easiest thing in the world for you. He actually could translate centigrade to Fahrenheit in his head, negative 100 degrees centigrade to Fahrenheit in his head when he was 6 years old. I was driving him to school. They saw one of those things with the time temperature. And he says, I don't know what the minus 100 centigrade is in Fahrenheit. And he even knew that you had to add 32 at the end to adjust for the difference of the 2 0 points. Didn't tell him that at all. All I told him was there's 9 Fahrenheit every 5 centigrade. You did all the rest of the thing. Geez, so he was super smart. So I said, math for some kids is really hard. For you, it's easy. You can do math in your head. A lot of kids have to work really, really hard to do math. I said, some kids find getting along with people really, really easy. For you, it's not. You have to work at it. That's your thing that you have to challenge yourself to do better. So it's always good to frame things that way where they don't feel like you're saying that they're bad all the time. Also always provide them with assurance that your love is not conditional on them behaving the way that you want. And that's a hard one sometimes. Lots of hugs and touches when things are going well. So, some recommended reading. Myth of the Hyperactive Child was how we started out. Peter Schrag and Diane Forkey. That was written back in the 70s before this was really a big thing, but it very much presaged what was coming. And that's where I learned a lot about the minimal brain damage history. Attention deficit disorder, a different perception. That's the farmer versus hunter by Tom Hartman. Really good. Raising Your Spirited Child talks about some of these behavioral techniques in a very positive way. This is a person who really believes the kind of things we're talking about here, that these kids are good kids that have some different needs, and we just try to approach them the way that works. Wild Colts Make the Best Horses by John Breeding, similar kind of idea. He's like, these kids are tough when they're kids, but they make great adults if you can survive their childhood. And then Suffer the Restless Children by Alfie Kohn, this Atlantic Monthly article that was written back in '89, and it just was the best description I ever saw of the whole complexities of this, not just the question of is medication working or not, but what is this ADHD thing and why are we doing this, and is it a good idea?
He also wrote a book called No Contest, where he talks about instead of giving rewards, you help kids, people, everybody develop internal and intrinsic motivation. So, yeah, interesting. Yeah, he was good.
So, I'm kind of out of time.
Woohoo!
Do we have to get kicked out of here, or
Yeah.
do we have a few minutes, or do we have to go?
Well, I'd say give yourself 5 minutes. They'll
I'll
come
definitely be around for questions. I also have copies of the book here, Jerk Radar, in the back. Jerk Radar has nothing to do with ADHD whatsoever. It's about how to avoid an abusive relationship by recognizing that the person is mean when they're still acting nice. And lots of conversations with domestic violence survivors, illustrating what their abusers were like when they stayed it out. So they'll be in
Steve,
that. I'll be here to ask some
Can we,
answers.
I mean, nobody's come right now. If there's a comment or
Do you have
two,
any questions or?
I just wanted to throw out that in May, the Arrow Conference, which is free school, open school from all around the country, and this year, the international one is going to be in America at the same time, and that only happens every 7 years. And that's, if you look up AERO, the Arrow Conference in free school, I'm sure you'll find it on Google. I've gone several years, and it's just amazing to talk to the children as well as the teachers and all the other folks.
And you reminded me to mention that part of this process for Kevin Yannick was that we actually helped to create a school that has the kind of open classroom setting that these kind of kids work best in. It was very child-centered, where you have lots of options, and kids don't all have to be the same age and the same thing. When he was in first kindergarten, or first grade, he was working with third graders on math and that kind of thing. He was in 7th grade, he was on the high school Frisbee team. It's called the Trillium Charter School in North Portland. And so if you have kids that are kind of like this and they're in Portland Public, it's a great place to consider.
Can I make an announcement about an upcoming event? Or?
Do we have any other questions real quick before we do anything else? Any last comments? Yeah.
Quick question, would you be able to share your slides with us, by any chance?
I'm going to figure out a way to get those up on the website, absolutely.
and we'll see if we could put the whole presentation on. We keep experimenting with doing this, and it somehow hasn't. None of them have gotten on the website, but we're hoping
We're going to figure it out.
to figure it out.
Go.
I just wanted to say that if people here are concerned about the globalization of the mental health crisis and the current paradigm of mental health care, a good segue into examining some of the economic and social forces that are driving the epidemic of mental illness. There's a good opportunity to get together and network folks on the other side of this issue at the Economics of Happiness Conference taking place at the Unitarian Church at Elliott Hall, February 27th to March 1st. It's for grassroots activists. It costs $50 to attend for all 3 days, but there are still scholarships available. So if you Google Economics of Happiness in Portland, you can get a scholarship. And I'm proud to say that Rethinking Psychiatry is going to be a co-sponsor of that event. If you're willing to volunteer to table for us at that event, you can get a free ticket for the whole 3-day event.
$50